You are now tuned into Then Radio. If you enjoy our videos, we ask that you consider joining our Patreon to support our channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you never miss a new video. We hope you enjoyed today's episode, and as always, thank you for watching.
Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend at Master Detective Sherlock Holmes. Before he starts, I can tell you something it's really worth knowing. Simply this. The best beginning a good meal ever had is a glass of Petri California Sherry. Petri Sherry is the perfect before-dinner wine. While you're waiting for dinner to be put on the table, pour yourself a glass of that clear, amber-colored Petri Sherry. Now, just sit back and sip it slowly. Take your time so you can thoroughly enjoy every single drop of that wonderful Petri flavor. And what a flavor that sherry has. It comes right from the sun-ripened heart of wonderful California grapes. You may be a real wine expert and know all about sherry wine, but believe me, until you've tried a Petri sherry, you're really missing something. Serve Petri sherry alone or serve it with canapes or appetizers. And by all means, serve it proudly. You can because the letters P-E-T-R-I spell the proudest name in the history of American wines. Petri. And now let's visit our good friend and host, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell. Draw up your usual chair and make yourself at home. How about a glass of sherry?
That'd be very nice. All ready for tonight's story, Doctor?
Yes, my boy. Here's your sherry.
Thank you, sir.
My story begins on a June night in 1889. My wife and I had spent a quiet evening at home, I remember. It was just about the hour that a man gives his first yawn and glances at the clock, when the tranquility of the scene was broken by the discordant jangling of our front doorbell.
An emergency call for you, I suppose, Doctor.
Not exactly, Mr. Bartell. It turned out to be a certain Mrs. Isa Whitney, an old friend of my wife's who'd come to us in trouble. Her husband, she told us, had been missing for 48 hours, and, knowing him to be the victim of the shocking habit of taking opium, she was convinced that he was lying drugged and stupefied in some foul den amid the London waterfronts.
And I suppose you went out to try to find him?
Yes, Mr. Bartell, I did. She told me that her husband had mentioned frequenting a place called the Bar of Gold in Upper Swandam Lane, so naturally that's where I began my search. I quickly located it, and after ordering my cab to wait, I entered the place. A strange sight met my eyes. Through the smoke-ridden gloom, I could catch a glimpse of bodies lying in strange, fantastic poses as they smoked the pipes of death. Most of the unhappy creatures lay silently, but some muttered to themselves and others talked together in strange, low, monotonous voices, their conversation coming in gushes and then trailing off into silence, each mumbling his own thoughts and paying little attention or heed to the words of his neighbor. As I entered, an attendant hurried up to me with an opium pipe and a supply of the drug and beckoned me to an empty berth.
Master may lie here.
I haven't come to stay here, my good man. I'm looking for a friend, Mr. Isa Whitney.
No one by that name here, master.
Well, I'm going to search this place just the same.
Please not to make trouble, master.
Watson? Is that you, Watson?
Whitney, thank heavens I've found you, man.
What time is it?
It's nearly 11.
Of what day?
What day? Friday, June the 19th.
Oh, good Lord, I thought it was Wednesday. It is Wednesday. You're trying to confuse me.
I tell you, it's Friday. Your wife has been waiting 2 days for you.
You're mixed up in your dates, Watson. I've only been here a few hours. 3 pipes, 4 pipes. I forget how many. I'll go home with you.
Here, I'll give you a hand. That's it. I have a cab waiting.
I must owe some money. Will you settle up for me, Watson?
Yes, of course. Here, wait here for me. Stop pulling at my sleeve, my good fellow. Who are you and what do you want?
A word in your ear, please, sir.
Oh, very well. What is it?
Get rid of your friend and join me outside.
Holmes. What on earth are you doing here in this den?
For your cab waiting?
Yes?
Then please use it to send your befuddled friend home in. And if you feel up to it, I should also recommend that you send a note to the cabman telling your wife that you have thrown in your lot with me. I'd be exceedingly glad to have a little talk with you.
Yes, of course, Holmes.
Splendid. Then conclude your business here, old chap. I'll meet you outside in about 10 minutes.
Where on earth is he? It's nearly... Is that you, Holmes?
Yes, Watson, it's me.
Your disguise is wonderful. I'd never recognized you if you hadn't spoke to me just now.
Disposed of your friend?
Yes, of course.
Splendid. Let's start walking. I have a horse and trap waiting for me in the next street.
Oh, what on earth were you doing in the Bar of Gold, Holmes?
Trying to get news of a missing man. You see, I'm in the midst of a very remarkable inquiry. And I'd hoped to get a clue from the incoherent ramblings of those poor devils back there. There's the horse and trap under the street lamp on the corner. You'll come with me, Watson?
Yes, of course, if I can be of any use.
A trusty comrade is always of use. My room at the Cedars has 2 beds in it.
The Cedars?
Yes, that's Mr. Neville St. Clair's house and our present destination. It's near Lee in Kent, about 7 miles from here. I'm using it as a headquarters while I conduct my inquiries.
Evening, Mr. Holmes. Everything all right?
Yes, thank you, John. Get in, Watson.
Right, John.
I shan't need you any more tonight, John. Here's half a crown for you. Look out for me tomorrow about 11.
Right you are, Mr. Holmes. Good night, gentlemen.
Good night, John. Go on, get up.
Well, Holmes, if we have a 7-mile drive ahead of us, perhaps you'll tell me about the case that you're working on.
With pleasure, old chap. But first, take the reins for a few minutes, will you? I want to remove my makeup and take off my wig and be comfortable. After that, I'll tell you why we are headed for the Kentish countryside at this hour of the night. Watson, you have a grand gift of silence. It makes you invaluable as a companion. We've driven 4 miles and you haven't uttered a word.
It wasn't easy, Holmes. I've been dying to question you, but I could see that you were preoccupied.
Then I shall reward you with a clear and concise statement. My problem. Mr. Neville St. Clair, aged 37, the father of 2 children and an affectionate husband, is missing. He left his house, the Cedars, near Lee, our present destination, last Monday.
4 days ago, eh?
Yes. Now, why should an affectionate husband and a happy father disappear?
Any money trouble?
No, I think not. His entire debts, at the moment, amount to £88, while he has £220 standing to his credit at the Capital and Counties Bank.
Who was the last person to see him on Monday?
His wife. But let me tell you the story. He left his house for London rather earlier than usual.
He was a businessman, then?
Yes, he has an interest in several companies in London, but his wife doesn't know exactly what he does. But to continue, he left for London saying that he would bring his little boy home a box of toy bricks. Now, by the merest chance, his wife received a telegram shortly after his departure saying that a parcel of considerable value was waiting for her at the offices of the Aberdeen Shipping Company.
Aberdeen Shipping? Why, their offices are in Fresno Street. I drove by them tonight.
Exactly, and Fresno Street branches out of Upper Swandam Lane, where the Bar of Gold is situated.
Ah, now I'm beginning to understand. Go on, Holmes, go on.
Mrs. St. Clair took a train for London, and at exactly 4:35 on Monday last, found herself walking past the Bar of Gold. Suddenly, she heard a cry, and looking up was horrified to see her husband beckoning to her from a second-story window.
Great Scott, was he a prisoner, or was he there of his own free will, do you suppose?
Undoubtedly, he was a prisoner. The window was open, and she distinctly saw his face, which she described as being terribly agitated.
Really?
He waved his hand to her frantically and then vanished from the window so suddenly that it seemed to her that he had been dragged back by some irresistible force from behind.
Oh, gracious me.
One singular point which struck her quick feminine eye was that although he wore the coat he had left for London in, he wore neither collar nor tie.
Well, what did she do?
Rushed down the steps into the Bar of Gold and attempted to go up the staircase leading to the second floor.
I suppose that Oriental fellow that I talked to tonight stopped her.
Exactly. In fact, he pushed her out of the door and slammed it after her. She rushed down the lane and a few moments later was lucky enough to meet a sergeant and 2 constables.
She took them back with her to the Bar of Gold, of course.
Yes. They went with her to the room in which Neville St. Clair had last been seen. Of course, there was no sign of him. In fact, on the whole floor, there was no one to be found except a hideous, deformed beggar who seemed to live there. From what Mrs. St. Clair told me, it appears that the sergeant conducted the examination quite intelligently.
Certain you saw your husband at this window, Mrs. Sinclair?
I'm positive, Sergeant.
And Alaska swears no one's been upstairs this afternoon. He's probably lying. But let's see what this cripple fellow has to say for himself. Here, you.
What do you want with me? I ain't done nothing.
Now, you heard what this lady said. Did you see her husband go in this room a few minutes ago?
I didn't see nobody, and I've been here all the afternoon.
You live here?
Yes.
And you swear on oath that no one's been in this room for the last few hours?
Yes, I do.
Mrs. Sinclair, I know that you think you saw your husband, but don't you suppose...
Look on the table.
Just a wooden box, ma'am.
But I know what's inside it. There, see?
Oh, it's a lot of wooden bricks like kids play with.
My husband came to London today especially to buy them for our son. You can't disbelieve me now, Sergeant.
Don't think I can, ma'am. I'll take another look round. Where does this door lead to?
My bedroom. Yeah, you won't find nothing in there.
Oh, we'll look just the same. Hello. There's bloodstains on this window ledge. Fresh bloodstains. How'd you account for that?
Well, I don't know nothing about it.
And the window overlooks the river, just where the water's good and deep, too. Nice place to tip a body out. Here, come here, you.
Yeah, I ain't done nothing.
You've got bloodstains on your right sleeve. What do you got to say about that?
Well, I cut my finger, see? And then I went and opened the window later. That's how the blood got there.
Did you think I was born yesterday? Let's have a look in this chest of drawers. Hello. Hello, whose clothes are these? Pair of trousers, socks, shoes, hat, everything except the coat, eh? Mrs. Sinclair, will you come in here, please, Mum?
What have you found, Sergeant?
These clothes. Are they your husband's, Mum?
Yes. Yes, they are. What's happened to him, Sergeant?
I'm afraid he's met with foul play, Mum. And this man knows what happened, only he won't talk.
I don't know nothing, I tell you.
Oh, don't you? Well, I arrest you in the name of the law, and I warn you that anything you say...
And so, Watson, the sergeant arrested this crippled beggar.
No, I'm not surprised. What have they been able to find out about him?
Surprisingly little. His name is Hugh Boone. And he's a professional beggar, quite a successful one, I gather. His pathetic appearance attracts great sympathy. There's a shock of orange hair and a pale face that is disfigured by a horrible scar which has twisted the outer edge of his upper lip.
And he was the last man to see Neville Sinclair alive, eh?
So it would seem. The Lascar downstairs has been cross-examined relentlessly, but he swears that he has no knowledge of the crime.
Have there been any further developments?
Oh, yes, old chap. Yes,
Huh?
indeed there have. The ebbing tide gave a fresh clue.
Do you mean Sinclair's body was washed out?
No, his coat.
What?
With every pocket stuffed with pennies and halfpennies. 421 pennies and 270 halfpennies, to be exact. There's no wonder that it had not been swept away by the tide.
But a human body was a different matter.
Yes, there's a strong eddy between the house and the wharf. It seems likely that the weighted coat had remained when the stripped body had been carried away into the river.
Well, the other clothes were found in the room. Why would the body be dressed in a coat alone?
We can only surmise, old chap, but supposing that this man Boone had thrust Neville Sinclair through the window and into the river, what would he do then?
Try and dispose of the telltale garments.
Yes, that would be logical, wouldn't it? He would seize the coat and be in the act of throwing it out of the window when it would occur to him that it would float and not sink.
So he loaded the pockets with coins to make it sink.
Quite so.
Yes, of course.
But he has little time, for he has heard the scuffle downstairs when Mrs. Sinclair tried to force her way up. He only succeeded in getting as far as throwing the coat out when the police arrived on the scene.
Well, that seems perfectly feasible.
Well, it'll do as a working hypothesis anyway.
Neville Sinclair disappeared on Monday, and yet we still don't know what he was doing in the opium den. What happened to him when he got there, or where he is now?
Oh, what Hugh Boone, the beggar with the twisted lip, had to do with his disappearance. Here we are at our destination.
Well, there's a light burning. Mrs. Sinclair must be waiting up for you.
Yes, poor woman. I hate to return here with no news of her husband, but she's being brave, Watson, extremely brave. We must do everything we can to comfort her.
Dr. Watson, I'm so grateful that you were able to come down and help your friend.
Oh, I only hope that I can be of some help, Mrs. Sinclair.
I see that you have no good news for me, Mr. Holmes.
I'm afraid not.
No bad.
No.
Thank heaven for that. Mr. Holmes, tell me honestly, do you think that Neville is still alive?
Well,
Frankly, now.
Frankly, then I don't.
You think he's murdered?
Oh, I don't say that, but perhaps you think...
And on what day did he meet his death?
On Monday.
Then perhaps, Mr. Holmes, you can explain how I received a letter from him today.
What?
Well, where is the letter, madam?
Here.
Let me see it. This is very crude writing on the envelope. Surely it's not your husband's hand?
No, but the writing in the letter is.
Uh-huh. This letter contained an enclosure.
Yes, there was a ring. His signet ring.
What does the letter say, Holmes?
Dearest, do not be frightened. All will come well. There is a huge error which it may take some little time to rectify. Wait in patience. And it's signed Neville. Mm-hmm. Written in pencil on the flyleaf of a notebook. No watermark. Posted today in Gravesend by a man with a dirty thumb. Mm-hmm. And the flap has been gummed, if I'm not mistaken, by a man who has been chewing tobacco.
My husband must be alive, Mr. Holmes.
This might be a clever forgery to put us off the track.
But the signet ring.
Yes, it may have been taken from him.
But the handwriting and then the postmark.
Might have been written on Monday and only posted today.
I won't be discouraged,
Mrs.
Mr.
St.
Holmes.
Clair, I have no wish to discourage you. I'm just trying to be practical. If your husband is alive and able to write letters, why should he remain away from you?
I can't imagine.
He made no special remarks before leaving on Monday?
No, none. Except to say that he was going to buy the wooden blocks.
When you saw him at the Bar of Gold in Swandam Lane, was the window open?
Yes,
Then he might have called to you.
he might.
As I understand it, he gave an inarticulate cry, a call for help, you thought.
Yes, he waved his hands.
But it might have been a cry of surprise. Astonishment at the unexpected sight of you might have caused him to throw up his hands.
I suppose so.
And you thought that he was pulled back from the window.
Yes, because he disappeared so abruptly.
He might have leaped back, mightn't he?
He might have, though I can't think why.
One last question. Had your husband ever shown signs of, taking opium?
Why, no, never, Mr. Holmes. I'm certain the idea would have revolted him.
Thank you, Mrs. Sinclair. Those were the principal points I wanted to be clear on. And now, Watson, I suggest we retire for the night. We may have a busy day ahead of us tomorrow.
I hope you both sleep well. Good night, Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
Good night, Mrs. Sinclair, and keep up your courage.
Good night, Mrs. Sinclair. We must hope for the best. The clouds seem lighter, though I should not venture to say that danger is over.
You'll hear the rest of Dr. Watson's story in just a second. So I'm just going to remind you that when you buy Petri California Sherry, you have a choice of two kinds of sherry. You can choose Petri regular sherry, or if you prefer your sherry dry, not sweet, ask for Petri Pale Dry Sherry. They're both fine wines. And if you don't know which you'd prefer, don't buy one, buy two. Buy them both and try them both. And remember this. Petri Sherry is the perfect all-round, all-occasion wine. It's good before dinner, after dinner, at cocktail time, and any time. Just be sure you get Petri. Petri Sherry. Well, Dr. Watson, you and the great Sherlock Holmes certainly deserved a good night's rest. Did you get it?
I did, Mr. Bartell, but Holmes made no attempt to sleep. As soon as we retired upstairs, he donned a blue silk dressing gown and then wandered about the room collecting pillows from his bed and cushions from the sofa and the armchairs. With these, he constructed a sort of eastern divan on which he perched himself cross-legged with an ounce of shag tobacco and a box of matches laid out in front of him.
He was all set for a session of thinking, I guess, huh?
Yes, my boy. In the dim light of the lamp, I saw him sitting there, an old briar pipe clenched in his teeth, his eyes fixed vacantly on a corner of the ceiling, the blue smoke curling up from him, silent, motionless. So he sat as I dropped off to sleep, and so he sat when I wakened in the morning to find the summer sun shining into the room. The pipe was still between his lips, the smoke still curled upward, and the room was full of a dense tobacco haze. But nothing remained of the heap of shag which I had seen on the previous night.
Watson. Awake, Watson?
What time is it?
20 minutes past 4.
Lord Holmes, you haven't been to bed.
True, old chap, I had to think. I couldn't allow my brain the luxury of sleeping. You game for a morning drive?
Yes, certainly. I'll get dressed.
Good. No one's stirring yet, but I know where the stable boy sleeps. I'll have the horse and trap out in no time at all.
Oh, where are we going?
To prison. To visit Hugh Boone, the man with the twisted lip.
Holmes, you're unusually excited. What's on your mind?
I want to test a little theory. I think, Watson, that you are now standing in the presence of one of the most absolute fools in Europe. I deserve to be kicked from here to Charing Cross, but I think I have the key to the affair now.
Oh, where is it?
In the bathroom.
What? You're joking, Holmes.
No, I've just been there and removed it. It's in my coat pocket now. Hurry and get dressed, old chap. And we'll drive over to the prison and see whether my key fits the lock.
Mr. Holmes. Dr. Watson.
Good morning, officer. Good morning.
Well, you're a couple of early birds, and no mistake.
Yes, Constable. We're searching for the proverbial worm. Who's on duty?
Inspector Bradstreet, sir.
Oh.
Oh, here he is now.
Good morning, Bradstreet.
Oh, hello, Mr. Holmes. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning, Inspector.
What can I do for you, gentlemen?
We called about Hugh Boone, the beggar man who is charged with being concerned in the disappearance of Mr. Neville St. Clair. You have him here?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. He's in the cells. I'll take you to him. Follow me, will you, gentlemen?
Thank you.
Well, what kind of a prisoner has he been, Inspector?
Oh, he hasn't given us any trouble, but he's a dirty devil. It's as much as we can do to make him wash his hands. His face is as black as a tinker's.
So he has an aversion to washing, has he?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Well, once his case has been settled, he'll have a regular prison bath, and when you see him, I think you'll agree with me that he needs it. Well, here we are. This is his cell. He's still asleep.
Good Lord, what a filthy, repulsive-looking fellow.
Yes, he's a beauty, isn't he? Want to go in, Mr. Holmes?
Please, Inspector.
Well, he certainly needs a wash.
Yes, I had an idea that he might. That's why I brought this sponge along in my pocket.
Oh, so that was the key that you found in the bathroom.
Oh, you're a funny one, Mr. Holmes, and no mistake. What did you bring a sponge along for?
I'll show you. Is there any water in this cell?
In the jug on the table there.
Yes. I soak the sponge in the water so, and then apply it to the prisoner's face, so.
Great Scott, his complexion's 3 shades lighter underneath, and the scar on his lip has disappeared.
What are you doing to me?
Now a tug on this mop of red hair, and I think we'll find it's a wig. Yes, come on. That's right. Let me introduce you to Mr. Neville St. Clair of Lee in the county of Kent.
Good Lord, Mr. Holmes, it's the missing man, all right. I recognize him from the photographs.
All right. I'm Neville St. Clair. What am I charged with?
With making away with Mr. Neville St. Oh, no, you can't be charged with that unless we make a case of attempted suicide of it.
Well, since I'm missing man, then it's obvious that no crime has been committed, and therefore I'm illegally detained.
No crime, but a very great error has been committed. You would have done better to have trusted your wife.
It wasn't only my wife, it was the children. I couldn't bear to have them know that their father was a common beggar. Now you've exposed me. What can I do?
Well, if you leave it to a court of law to clear this matter up, sir, you can hardly avoid newspaper publicity. But if you're perfectly honest with us now, I'm sure that the inspector and Mr. Holmes won't be too hard on you.
No, Mr. St. Clair. Inspector Bradstreet will, I'm sure, make notes on the information that you give us and submit them to the proper authorities. But now, sir, your story, please. Why have you been posing as Hugh Boone, a crippled beggar with a twisted lip?
Well, it's a simple enough story. Some years ago, I was a newspaper reporter. One day, my editor wanted an article on begging in the London metropolis.
I suppose you thought the best way to get your facts was to disguise yourself as a beggar.
Yes, I'd been an actor in my youth, and it wasn't hard for me to adopt a convincing disguise. But that was the point where all my trouble started. On that first day I sat in the London streets, I found to my amazement that I received no less than 26 shillings and 4
Almost as much as your weekly salary as a reporter, I imagine.
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Well, you can imagine how hard it was to settle down to arduous work at £2 a week when I knew that I could earn as much in a couple of days by smearing my face with paint, laying my cap on the ground, and sitting still. Only one man knew my secret.
The Lascar at the Bar of Gold in Upper Swandam Lane, eh?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. Mm-hmm. Every morning I would emerge from there dressed as a beggar, and in the evenings I'd return and transform myself into a well-dressed man about town. The fellow was well paid for his rooms, and well, I knew that my secret was safe in his possession.
And when you got married, you couldn't bring yourself to confide in your wife, I suppose.
No, I couldn't. My wife knew that I had a business in the city. She little knew what.
When you saw your wife from the window last Monday, you quickly changed back into the character of the beggar, I suppose.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Of course.
And then weighted my coat and threw it into the river.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't think there's anything else I need explain, is there, gentlemen?
One point. The signet ring that you sent your wife.
Well, I knew that she'd be worrying. So I gave it to the Lascar at a moment when no constable was watching me, together with a hastily scribbled note.
That note only reached her last night, Mr. St. Clair.
Last night? Oh, poor Catherine. What a dreadful week she must have spent.
The police have been watching that Lascar. He probably found it difficult to post the letter for you without being spotted.
Yes, I would surmise he gave it to a sailor customer of his to post. A sailor who chewed tobacco and had a dirty thumb. Yes, I think all the ends are tied off very neatly now. One last question, Mr. Sinclair. Have you ever been prosecuted for begging?
Oh, many times, but what was a fine to me?
It's got to stop here and now, Mr. Sinclair. If the police had asked this thing up, there must be no more of you, Boone, the beggar.
I swear it.
And you must tell your wife the truth at once. If you'd done that a long time ago, you'd have saved both of yourselves a very great deal of misery, sir.
I shall tell her everything.
Well, Mr. Holmes, we're very much obliged to you for having cleared this matter up. I wish I knew how you reached your results, though.
Well, in this case, my dear Inspector, I reached them by sitting upon 5 pillows and consuming an ounce of shag tobacco. I only wish that all my problems might be solved so comfortably.
Doctor, that was some story. Imagine arresting a man for committing a murder and then finding out that he's the fellow who's supposed to be dead.
It is a bit bewildering, isn't it?
You said it. Boy, being a detective sure has its surprises. Nothing like that ever happens to me.
Oh, come. One would believe to hear you talk that you lead a very uneventful life.
Oh, but I do, Doctor, I do. Why, I never get any surprises. Look, I tell our friends that Petri wine is always good wine. And what happens?
Well, what does happen?
Everybody agrees it's good wine, and that's that. Well, it's just got to be. After all, the Petri family has been making wine for generations. Winemaking is their heritage. A heritage passed on down from father to son, from father to son, from generation to generation. The Petri family knows full well the art of turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. And because the making of Petri wine is a family affair, you can be sure that the name Petri on a bottle of wine really stands for something. It's your assurance that every drop of wine in that bottle is good wine. No matter what type wine you prefer, you'll never go wrong with a Petri wine because Petri took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes adventure are you planning to tell us next week?
Well, now let me see. Next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a weird story of violence and of sudden death that struck without warning. I call it the strange adventure of the uneasy easy chair.
This episode from the life of Sherlock Holmes will be transmitted to our men and women overseas by short wave and through the worldwide facilities of the Armed Forces Radio Service. Petri Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petri family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invite you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his old friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And if you don't mind, I'd like to suggest something that you might share with your friends. And that something is a glass of sherry before dinner. Naturally, a glass of Petri California sherry. I say Petri sherry because it's the perfect before-dinner wine. You couldn't think of a better way to begin a meal. That Petri sherry has a beautiful, inviting color, like dark amber. And for flavor, well, you've heard sherry described many times as having a rich, nut-like flavor. But if you want to learn for the first time what those words rich and nut-like really mean, you just taste Petri sherry. It's wonderful. Serve Petri sherry by itself or serve it with hors d'oeuvres of those little cocktail sandwiches. And incidentally, if you prefer your sherry dry, not sweet, just ask your wine merchant for Petri pale dry sherry. The important thing to remember is, if you want sherry, you want Petri sherry, because that means good sherry. Now let's look in on our genial friend and good host, Dr. Watson. Good evening, Doctor.
Good evening, Mr. Bartell. Punctual to the minute as usual.
Never keep a doctor waiting, I always say. Particularly Dr. Watson.
Draw up a chair, my boy.
Thanks.
That's it.
All ready to tell us the Sherlock Holmes adventure of the Speckled Band, Doctor?
Yes, I'm all ready, Mr. Bartell.
Say, Doctor, just what does the Speckled Band mean?
Wait till I've told you the story, young fellow, my lad. You'll find out for yourself.
Sorry. The floor is all yours, Doctor.
The adventure of the Speckled Band began on a rainy April morning in 1883. An urgent call from one of my patients had kept me up most of the night before, and in consequence, I came down to my breakfast rather later than usual, to find that Holmes had already left our house some hours earlier. As I sat there reading the morning paper and consuming my 2 lightly boiled eggs, there was a knock on the door. It opened to disclose a typical example of the British working man. A bag of tools in one hand and a grimy cap in the other. I can hear him now as he spoke to me from the doorway.
You sent for me, Mr. Holmes?
I'm not Mr. Holmes.
Oh, beg your pardon, Governor. I'm counting them in the gas bracket over the mouthpiece.
Oh? What's wrong with it?
I've got a leak in it.
A leak? Oh, well, get along with your work.
Yes, sir. Hope I won't disturb you, sir.
Oh, no, that's all right, my man. Don't mind me.
Very untidy man, Mr. Holmes, sir.
What do you mean by that?
Well, sir, you can't help noticing the mess this room's in. I've heard say he was as tidy as anyone. He started, but he learned his habits from a bloke what lived with him. Dr. Watson, I think his name.
You impertinent fellow, how dare you talk like that? I've got a good man. Where does the fellow go? Here, come out of there. That's Mr. Holmes's room.
Don't be angry with me, Watson. I was just slipping out of these grimy rags and into a dressing gown.
Oh, good gracious me. So it was you, Holmes. Upon my soul, I'd never recognized you, but why the disguise?
Well, a case, my dear fellow, a case. One of those small problems which a trusting public occasionally confides to my investigation. To the British workman, old chap, all doors are open. Yes. His costume is unostentatious and his habits are sociable. Tool bag is an excellent passport. And a tawny moustache will secure the the cooperation of the maids.
Oh, but what's the case, Holmes?
Modest little drama of life in the kitchen. One of those seemingly inconsequential affairs, and yet the honor of a duchess is at stake.
What?
Mad world, my masters, a mad world. Now I feel a little more comfortable. Let's return to the sitting room, shall we? And a strong cup of tea would be acceptable.
Oh, wish you'd tell me about the duchess and life in the kitchen.
Another time, old fellows, another time. At the moment, suppose you tell me what you know of Miss Helen Stoner. I received a letter from her this morning in which she informed me that she would be calling here at 11, and also that she was a friend of yours.
Yes, Helen Stoner. Yes, indeed, a charming girl.
Then pour me a cup of tea, Watson, and tell me about her.
Well, I befriended her at the time of the tragic death of her sister 2 years ago. I told you about the case, don't you remember? The sudden death of Violet Stoner at an old house in Stoke Moran?
Yes. Huh? It all comes back to me now. There was an inquest, wasn't there, with a string of stupid and ineffective witnesses.
Oh, stupid? I was one of them.
Oh, I beg your pardon, old fellow. Then you were the exception, of course. Wait a minute. Let me see. I docketed the evidence on the case. Where was it? That's Scrapbook. Oh, yes, here we are. Now, let's see. Yes. F. Salisbury, Hatchet, Murder, Lordson, Simon. Here we are. Stoke Moran. Oh, yes, of course. I remember the affair quite well now. The villain of the piece was Dr. Grimsby Roylott, wasn't he?
Yes, a dreadful fellow. He's the stepfather of the 2 girls. Violet, the one who died so mysteriously, and Helen, the one who's coming here to see you.
Dr. Roylott is a pretty record. 55 years of age, killed his Pitmagar in India, once in an insane asylum, married money, wife died, distinguished surgeon. I wonder what the distinguished surgeon has been up to now.
Some deviltry, I fear.
Oh, why do you say that?
You remember that Miss Violet Stoner's death followed close upon the announcement of her engagement?
Yes, I do.
Well, I met Miss Helen Stoner in the streets a few weeks ago. She told me that she had just become engaged herself to a young fellow in the army who was leaving for the Far East. She was very upset. The thought of being alone with her stepfather at Stoke Moran.
Well, that's quite natural. You see, Dr. Roylott stands to lose a considerable sum of money in the event of his stepdaughter's marriage.
Yes, they both had a trust fund which he administered only as long as the girls were unmarried. That fact was brought out at the coroner's inquest 2 years ago. But if Roylott did poison the other stepdaughter, and I'm convinced he did, it seems unlikely that he'd try it again. 2 sudden deaths in the same household would hardly pass the coroner.
No, my dear Watson. You're making the mistake of putting your normal brain into Roylett's abnormal being.
Oh, that must be Miss Stoner now.
Yes, it's precisely 11 o'clock. Well, let's see what we can do for her.
I hope you can help her, Holmes. She's an extremely nice girl.
Come in. Yes, Mrs. Hudson?
There's a Miss Helen Stoner to see you, sir. Oh. She says she has an appointment.
Show her in, please, Mrs. Hudson.
Aye, sir. Come in, my dear. Thank you.
Oh, Miss Stoner, I'm so glad to see you again.
Oh, how do you do, Dr. Watson? And this must be your friend.
Yes, Miss Stoner, I am Sherlock Holmes. Sit down by the fire, won't you?
Yes, please sit down there. You're trembling with cold.
It's not cold that makes me shiver. Tell me, Mr. Holmes, has my stepfather, Dr. Grimsby Roylott, been here?
No, he hasn't.
He saw me in the street. I dashed by him in a hansom cab, but he saw me. Our eyes met, and he waved me to stop, but I came here as fast as I could.
A very sensible move. Dr. Watson has already given me several hints as to your present problem, as well as having refreshed my memory as to the circumstances of your sister's death.
My problem is a simple enough one, Mr. Holmes. I'm waiting to be murdered.
No.
Please be a trifle more explicit, Miss Stoner.
Very well, Mr. Holmes. My fiancé is leaving for the Far East today. When he leaves, I shall be alone with my stepfather at Stoke Moran. He plans to murder me just as he murdered my sister.
What makes you say that, Miss Stoner?
Many strange things have happened recently. For instance, he's just moved me into the bedroom in which my sister died.
What reason did he give for changing your room?
That my old one needed repainting. It didn't need it, but Dr. Roylott did need to move me into that horrible room. And other things have happened. I've heard the music again.
Music? What music?
My sister first heard it a few days before she died. I heard it myself on that dreadful night she breathed her last. I was horned terrified.
Don't worry any more, my dear. Don't worry. You have friends to help you now. Look here. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions?
No, of course not.
Very well, then. Now, this music, does it seem to come from inside the house or outside?
Well, it's hard to say. It sounds so faint.
What's it like?
A sort of soft, droning sound.
Like a flute or pipe?
Yes, it reminds me of native music I heard during my childhood in India.
India, eh? Oh.
There's one other thing that puzzles me, Mr. Holmes.
Oh, what's that?
My sister's dying words. As she lay in my arms, she gasped out 2 words.
What were they?
Band and Speckled. You remember that evidence from the inquest, don't you, Dr. Watson?
Yes, I do. I couldn't make head or tail of it. Oh.
Band, Speckled, Indian music. Miss Stoner, do you sleep with your door and windows fastened?
Yes, Mr. Holmes, but so did poor Violet. It didn't save her, though.
What did you gather from your sister's dying allusion to a band? A speckled band?
Well, sometimes I thought it was merely the wild talk of delirium, and sometimes that it referred to a band of people.
Oh, yes.
I remember that there were some gypsies encamped quite near us at the time of Violet's death.
Gypsies, eh?
Yes. It occurred to me that the spotted, gaily-coloured kerchiefs, which so many of them wear over their heads, might have suggested the unusual adjectives which my sister used.
Miss Stoner, how long is it since you heard this strange music that you told us about?
I heard it last night.
Last night?
Your fiancé leaves today, you say?
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Well, Miss Stoner, I shall do everything I can to help you. If we were to come down to Stoke Moran today, would it be possible to see over your rooms without the knowledge of your stepfather?
I think so. He told me this morning that he intended to take a late train home tonight.
Splendid. Watson, up with the timetable, old fellow, and look up the trains to Stoke Moran.
Right, you are, Holmes.
Oh, that's my stepfather. I know it is. Oh, yes. Yes, there he is on the doorstep. Oh, Mr. Holmes, he's followed me. What shall I do if he finds me here?
Don't worry, Miss Stoner. Please don't worry. There's a private exit through that room there. Watson will show you the way.
Come along with me, my dear young lady.
And you will come down today, Mr. Holmes?
Certainly, Miss Stoner. I'll telegraph you the time of our arrival. Goodbye and courage, my dear.
Goodbye, Mr. Holmes, and thank you.
Come along quickly, Miss Stoner.
Come in. Yes, Mrs. Hudson?
A gentleman, sir. I told him he wouldn't see anyone without an appointment.
Out of the way, woman.
Will he push me like that? I'm sorry, Mr.
That's all right, Mrs. Hudson. You can leave us.
What kind of gentleman does he call himself, pushing an old woman?
So you're Sherlock Holmes.
You have the advantage of me, sir. Your name is...
My name, sir, is Roylott. Dr. Grimsby Roylott of Stoke Moran.
Oh, yes, of course, indeed. Charming place, I hear, and obviously good for the lunch.
You won't trifle with me if you know what's good for you.
Ah, Watson, there you are. How was the experiment?
Very successful, Holmes. Good day to you, Dr. Roylott. I haven't seen you since I gave evidence at your stepdaughter's inquest.
Yes, I remember you, Dr. Watson. Now listen to me, you two. My stepdaughter's been here. I faced her. What's she been saying to you?
It's a little cold for the time of year, isn't it?
You answer me.
I hear the crocuses promise well.
You dare to try and put me off, do you? I know you, you scoundrel. You're Holmes, the meddler.
Oh, am I?
Holmes, the busybody.
I believe that a man should occupy his time.
Holmes, the Scotland Yard jack in office.
When you go out, close the door, won't you? There's a draft.
I'll go when I've had my way. Keep your nose out of my affairs, do you hear?
Oh, yes, my hearing is excellent, thank you. And your diction and delivery most forceful. But time flies, my dear doctor. Time flies, and life has its duties as well as its pleasures. Goodbye.
Insolent rascal. Here. See this poker?
Oh, the fire doesn't need poking, thank you, doctor, please. But I should be obliged if you put some more coal on for me.
You laugh at me. You don't know my strength. Look. There. Your poker's bent double. And that's what I'll do to both of you. Don't keep out of my affairs.
Oh, dear. I had a presentiment that he'd slam the door.
Phew. He's an ugly customer, Holmes.
Literally as well as figuratively. Watson, I'd be much obliged if you get your revolver. It may prove to be an excellent argument for the gentleman who twists iron pokers into knots.
The fellow's amazingly strong. Well, look at it.
Well, I don't want to appear flamboyant, but... there we are.
Great Scott, Holmes, you straightened the poker out again.
Yes, it was utterly useless in its former shape. And now, Watson, that timetable will catch the next fast train for Stoke Moran.
Mr. Holmes, Dr. Watson, I'm so relieved that you've come. But don't you think my stepfather might have followed you down here?
You have to take that chance, Miss Stoner. A few hours' delay might mean a difference between your life and death. It was imperative that we examine this bedroom of yours before Dr. Roylett's return.
Anyway, my dear, you mustn't worry any more. We're here in your house, and we're going to take good care that no harm befalls you.
Thank you, Dr. Watson.
So this is the room in which your sister died, is it? Much as I pictured it.
Dr. Roylett's room adjoins this one, you say, Miss Turner?
Yes, Doctor, on that side. The room which adjoins it on the other side is my regular bedroom.
The one's being so conveniently painted, eh? Well, let's examine this room. Uh-huh. No trapdoors or sliding panels, I suppose.
Sounds solid enough, Holmes.
Yes, I think it is. Mara, what's this? Are you aware that this bed is clamped to the floor, Miss Stoner?
Why, no, Mr. Holmes, I didn't know that.
What an extraordinary thing.
Was the bed in your other room anchored also?
No, I don't think it was.
Very illuminating. And this bell pull hanging against the wall above your bed.
Oh, it doesn't work.
Well, but if you want to ring.
There's another one on the other wall over there.
Then why this one?
I don't know. My stepfather made a number of changes after we came here.
Yes, quite a burst of activity, apparently. And it took some strange shapes.
Oh, why are you standing on the bed, Holmes?
I'm curious, old fellow. Uh-huh. It may interest you to know that this bell rope is fastened to a brass hook. There's no wire attachment. It's a dummy.
A dummy? But why?
There's a small screen above it. It's a ventilator, I suppose.
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Yes. A ventilator leading into your stepfather's room. Curious. I noticed there's no means of opening the ventilator on this side. It can only be operated from your stepfather's room next door. I wonder if you might mind taking us in there.
Of course, Mr. Holmes. Follow me.
Thank you.
What do you make of it, old Holmes?
There's devil's work afoot, old chap.
Here we are, Mr. Holmes.
Much the same as the other room. A bit bigger, perhaps.
That large safe against the wall seems to be an unusual piece of bedroom furniture. What is it, Miss Stoner?
My stepfather's business papers are in it.
You've seen inside it, then?
Only once, some years ago. I remember that it was full of documents.
What's this saucer of milk doing on the top of it? Does Dr. Roylett keep a cat?
No, but he does have a cheetah and a baboon as pets. He brought them with him from India.
Well, Holmes, a cheetah is just a big cat.
That's true, my dear fellow, but I doubt if a saucer of milk would go very far in satisfying the appetite of a cheetah. Well, I think I've seen enough. This matter is too serious for hesitation. Your life may depend upon your following my instructions, Mrs. Stoner.
I'll do anything you say, Mr. Holmes, anything.
Is that the village inn I see through the trees from this window?
Yes, the Queen's Arms.
Your bedroom windows would be visible from there?
Yes, Mr. Holmes.
Very well, then. Watson and I will go there now and obtain accommodation. When your stepfather returns, you must confine yourself to your room on the pretense of a headache. You follow me?
Perfectly.
When Dr. Roylett retires for the night, you must open your bedroom window and put your lamp on the sill as a signal to us at the inn. Then withdraw quietly to your usual bedroom and the one that's being painted. I'm sure that you could manage there for one night.
Of course. But what will you do?
When we get your signal, Dr. Watson and I will come here and spend the night in your dead sister's room. We are going to solve this mystery of the dummy bell pull, the unusual ventilator, and the strange music in the night.
You'll hear the remainder of Dr. Watson's story in just a second, so I'm just going to point out that at any really important dinner, you know, like when diplomats get together,
you'll find wine on the table. Because for years it's been a known fact that good wine makes good food taste better. Prove that to yourself tomorrow night by having your dinner together with a glass of Petri wine. If you prefer a red wine for any meat or meat dish, try a Petri California Burgundy. That rich, hearty red Petri Burgundy is really out of this world. Now, if you'd rather have a subtle, intriguing white wine, let's say to go with chicken or fish, then try Petri California Sauterne. But Sauterne or Burgundy, to make sure it's good, make sure it's Petri, won't you? Well, Doctor, it's a rattling good story so far. What happened next? You went to the local inn, I guess, and waited for that lantern to appear in the bedroom window at Dr. Roylett's house?
That's right, Mr. Bartell. We had an early dinner at the Queen's Arms and then retired to our upstairs bedroom and sat side by side, puffing away at our pipes, our eyes straining through the darkness for that telltale lantern to give us the signal that there was dangerous work ahead of us. As we sat there discussing the various aspects of the case, I remember that Holmes was very concerned about my own safety.
I really have some scruples about taking you with me tonight. This is an infernally dangerous business.
And what about that poor girl alone in the house with that fiend, Roylett?
Now, I can handle the case by myself, old chap.
I'm coming with you, Holmes. You speak of danger. We haven't seen more in those rooms than was visible to me.
No, but possibly I've deduced a little more. I imagine that you saw all that I did.
Well, I saw nothing remarkable except the bell rope, and what purpose that could answer, I confess, is more than I can imagine.
Saw the ventilator, too.
Yes, but I don't think it's such an unusual thing to have an opening between two rooms. So small that a mouse could hardly pass through it.
True, but at least you will admit there is a curious sequence of coincidences. A ventilator is constructed, a bell cord is hung from it, a lady sleeps in a bed directly below the ventilator, a bed that is anchored to the floor. The lady dies.
You can see what you're driving at, Holmes. Look. There's a lantern in Miss Turner's window.
That's our signal, all right. Come on, Watson. Our night's vigil begins.
Foul night.
Foul night for a foul business, Watson. Come on. Through these laurel bushes. It's only another 50 yards to the house.
The lantern's still burning away in the bedroom window.
Yes, and all the other lights are out.
Including the one in Dr. Roylett's room. He must have gone to sleep.
To bed, possibly, Watson, but not, I think, to sleep.
Great heavens, Holmes. Look at that frightful creature leaping about in the moonlight. It looks like some hideous child.
That's Dr. Roylett's pet baboon.
It looks positively human.
Yes. Probably a great deal more so than its master. Get directly below the window now. If ivy provides a most convenient ladder, I'll go up first. Here, wait. Come on, careful.
Yeah, I hope the thing is strong enough to hold us both. Oh, we look pretty stupid, flattening our backs in the mud. Give me a hand, Holmes, will you? I can't quite get my leg over this window ledge. There you are. Thank you. Oh, my gosh.
Close the shutters.
Looks exactly the same as it did this afternoon.
Least sound would be fatal to our plans. Keep the lamp covered, so that if the ventilator is open from Dr. Roylett's room, no light will show from in here, you understand? That's it.
Oh, why are you carrying that sticker?
Prepared for a visitor, I expect before the night is over. A visitor who will herald his entrance with faint music from an Indian pipe.
You mean the music?
Exactly.
A signal?
That's right. A signal to an accomplice who can enter a room of locked doors. An accomplice who kills and leaves no trace.
You mean the...
No more talking, Watson. No more talking. I'll sit on the edge of the bed here. You sit on that chair. Be a revolver ready in case you should need it.
Right, your Holmes.
Have the lantern ready, too. When I shout now, turn the lights. Pull on the top of the bell rope. You understand?
Perfect.
Good. Now we must wait. Perhaps for some time. But don't go to sleep, old fellow. Don't go to sleep. Your very life may depend on it. Watson. Yes. You're not smoking, are you?
No.
There's no tobacco smoke.
Must be drifting through the ventilator.
Exactly. Roylott is up. Look. There's a tiny shaft of light showing up in the ventilator. Shh, quiet. Listen. There's the music. Yes. Heralding the messenger of death. Have you your lantern ready?
Oh, Watson, no! Great heavens, it's a snake! Trailing down the bell rope! You can't kill it, Ratstick. Holmes, out of the way! I'm trying to get a shot at it!
Wait, Kate!
There it goes! There it goes back through the ventilator! What a fiendish plan! Great Scott, what's that?
I think the devil has turned on his master. Come on, Watson, into Dr. Roylott's room. Dr. Roylott!
Good Lord, Holmes. Look at him sprawled on the bed. Look at his eyes.
Yes, and see what's coiled round his body.
It's a snake.
Yes, the band. The Speckled Band.
He's dead, Holmes.
Yes, he's been bitten by the deadliest snake in the world, the Indian swamp adder. Its deadly fangs produce death within 10 seconds. Well, Watson, violence does in truth recoil upon the violence, and the schemer falls into the pit which he digs for another.
What should we do now, Holmes?
We must remove the macabre headgear from the dead doctor and return the snake to its den. And I suggest we tell Miss Stoner that there's no more danger for her under this roof. After that, we can turn the matter over to the local police. Our work is done.
Holmes, Dr. Watson, I can't tell you how grateful I am that you brought me back here to Baker Street.
Miss Stoner, it would have been inhuman to leave you in that house of death and horror. We've a spare bedroom, and Mrs. Hudson is a motherly and understanding woman. And I can assure you that Dr. Watson and I will be delighted to have you stay here until you've decided on your future plans.
Yes, of course we will, my dear. In fact, it's rather refreshing to have a touch of youth about the place.
You're both so kind. I think it's wonderful how you foiled my stepfather's devilish plans.
Yes, wasn't it? A remarkable example of logical deduction.
No, it wasn't, old chap. But first, your mention of the gypsies, Miss Stoner, the use of the word band, put me on an entirely wrong scent. However, when we examined the fatal room, I drew the obvious conclusion.
You mean the dummy bell rope, the ventilator, and the movable bed?
That's right, old fellow. It instantly gave rise to the suspicion that the rope was there as a bridge for something coming through the ventilator and traveling on down to the bed. I at once thought of a snake. I saw the saucer of milk on top of the safe. Well, my suspicions crystallized into certainty.
Fiendish plot, fiendish.
Yes, and an extremely clever one.
Exactly.
My stepfather must have trained the snake to return to him when he played the music.
Yes. He put it through the ventilator with his certainty that it would crawl down the rope and land on the bed. It might or might not bite the occupant. Perhaps she might escape every night for a week, but, oh well, sooner or later she must fall a victim.
Thank heaven I came to you, Mr. Holmes.
Amen to that, Miss Stoner.
You know, Holmes, if you hadn't lashed at the snake with your stick, I bet it wouldn't have turned back on its master.
That's true, old chap. That way I'm no doubt indirectly responsible for Dr. Grimsby Roylott's death. But I can't say it's a fact that's likely to weigh too heavily on my conscience.
Well, Doctor, that was quite a fascinating story. You know something? I'm not exactly a coward, but no kidding, my toes really curl when I get mixed up with snakes.
You're not alone in that respect, Mr. Bartell. I must admit that I like to have a revolver and at least 20 feet between me and any snake that wants to cross my path.
Well, if you want a revolver and 20 feet, I'll take a cannon and 20 miles.
Fortunate that you're a wine expert, Mr. Bartell, and not a detective. I'm afraid you wouldn't, shall we say, find detecting much to your liking.
We certainly shall say it. And incidentally, I'm not a wine expert, Doctor. All I know about wine is that it either tastes good or it doesn't. And I also know that Petri wine always tastes good. The Petri family sees to that. The name Petri on the label is the personal assurance of the Petri family that every drop of wine in that bottle is good wine. And they know how to make it good, because they've been making fine wine for generations, handing down from father to son, every secret, every skill of the winemaker's art.
Yes, the Petrie family took time to bring you good wine. That's why no matter what type of wine you wish, you can't go wrong with a Petrie wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes story are you planning to tell us next week?
Well, now, let me see. Next week, Mr. Bartell, I think I'll tell you an adventure that took place at a gambling casino in the south of France. It's a strange story of sudden tragedy and death. I call it The Adventure of the 00.
Sounds swell. We'll all be listening.
Oh, now, just a minute, Mr. Bartell. Before I go, I want to say that every one of our friends bought war bonds to help our boys win the war. Now let's all buy victory bonds to help bring them back home again. Yes, and let's buy victory bonds to make sure that the men who were wounded will get the finest possible care. Those same victory bonds will help make the GI Bill of Rights a success, too. And they'll help provide for the families of those men who gave everything, including their lives. The men of our armed forces finished their job. Now let's finish ours. Buy victory bonds.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure is written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and is an adaptation of the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The Adventure of the Speckled Band. Music is by Dean Postler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petrie Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. This is Harry Bartell saying good night for the Petrie family. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
Petrie Wine brings you Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes. The Petrie family, the family that took time to bring you good wine, invites you to listen to Dr. Watson tell us another exciting adventure he shared with his good friend, that master detective, Sherlock Holmes. And I'd like to tell you about my favorite time of day. It's just before dinner. You know, when the family's all sitting around in the living room and wonderful things are cooking in the kitchen? Ah, that's for me. And boy, that's the time for a glass of sherry. Because Petrie California sherry really makes waiting for dinner a pleasure. That Petrie sherry is the perfect before-dinner wine. Just look at its beautiful amber color. And then taste that wonderful Petrie sherry. What a flavor. Petrie sherry has a rich, nutty flavor that's right from the heart of sun-ripened grapes. And if you like your sherry dry, you know, not sweet, you'll want to get Petrie Pale Dry Sherry. Or better yet, taste them both. Don't buy one, buy two. Those letters P-E-T-R-I on the label are the personal assurance of the Petrie family that Petrie sherry is truly good wine. And now it's time to keep the weekly appointment with our good friend, Dr. Watson. How are you this evening, Doctor?
I never felt better, thank you, Mr. Bartell. Draw up your usual chair and make yourself comfortable.
Thanks.
That's it.
Oh, I see you've had the old tin dispatch box out again. I suppose you've been going through your notes on tonight's new Sherlock Holmes adventure?
Yes, Mr. Bartell, and I think you'll find it as pretty a little problem as we ever encountered. The story began in 1887, a very busy year for us, my boy. It was the same year that Holmes solved the case of the Amateur Mendicant Society, who held their meetings in a luxuriously furnished vault below a furniture warehouse.
Oh, I remember that story, Doctor. And wasn't 87 the year you both escaped from death in the Paradol chamber?
It was indeed. You've got a very good memory, Mr. Bartell. The story I'm going to tell you tonight topped off this unusually exciting year. It was late in October, and the equinoctial gales had set in with exceptional violence. All day the wind had howled, and the rain had beaten against the windows of our Baker Street lodgings. Finally, it was nearly midnight, as far as I remember. The storm grew higher and louder, and the wind in the chimney sobbed like a child. Suddenly, much to our surprise, the doorbell jangled, and a few moments later, our midnight visitor stood before us. He was a man of about 45, and as he looked about him anxiously in the glare of the lamp, I could see that his face was pale and that his eyes heavy, like those of a man who was weighed down with some great anxiety. And yet when he spoke, his tone was businesslike and almost aggressive.
I've come to you for advice, Mr. Holmes.
That's easily obtained.
And help.
That is not always so easy. Help the gentleman off with his coat, will you, Watson?
Here you are, sir. Let me hang it up for you.
Thank you, sir. I heard of you, Mr. Holmes, from Major Prendergast.
Oh, yes.
He said that you could solve anything.
Oh, I'm afraid he said too much.
But you've never been beaten.
I've been beaten 4 times, sir. 3 times by men and once by a woman. But supposing you sit down and introduce yourself. My friend's name is Watson, Dr. Watson.
How do you do, sir?
How do you do, Doctor? My name is Lovelace, Edmund Lovelace.
And what brings you to me at this hour of the night, Mr. Lovelace?
I'm in terrible trouble, Mr. Holmes. You don't know anything about me, but if you'll accept my case, you can save 4 lives.
I wouldn't say that I know nothing about you, sir, though it's true that I know little beyond the somewhat obvious facts that, you're single, that you keep a dog, but not a manservant, and that you are much preoccupied with your business, which I take to be some form of insurance.
Oh, come. Oh, steady.
Now, what is this?
Well, I'll wager that my friend's right, though. Isn't he, Mr. Lovelace?
Perfectly. But I'll be hanged if I can see how he knows it.
It's a practical application of logic, sir. The briefcase that you carry might at first indicate a barrister or some other professional man, but your brusque, businesslike manner counteracts that suggestion. An insurance broker who must visit clients at odd hours is the likeliest man to combine that manner with a briefcase at midnight.
But the wife and the manservant, and the fact that I'm preoccupied with my business.
Your cufflinks don't match, sir. Each is from a different pair. That would suggest preoccupation, and it's a mistake that neither a wife nor a manservant would have allowed to pass.
Yes, but how about the dog?
Oh, surely that's obvious, Watson.
Well, I can't see it.
I shall let you ponder on that matter while Mr. Lovelace tells us his problem.
Mr. Holmes, are you as interested in preventing a murder as in solving one?
Well, naturally I am, Mr. Lovelace. Even more so. But please tell me your story.
I live with 4 cousins of mine in an old house in Camberwell. My grandfather left the house and a sizable fortune to the 5 of us on condition that we lived together and maintained a family unity. It probably won't surprise you to know that we've grown to get pretty much on each other's nerves.
Well, what happens if one of you dies, Mr. Lovelace?
His share is divided among the others, Doctor.
Well, the wonder to me is, sir, that not that a murder may take place, but that it has not happened long ago. Who's responsible for the administration of the estate?
My cousin Gerald. He's much older than the rest of us, and he's a thoroughly unpleasant, cantankerous man.
Yeah.
He gets an extra share in the estate as administrator, and in consequence he doesn't work. We feel, of course, that he lives off us, and we're continually quarrelling with him about it.
Well, sounds like a jolly household, I must say.
There's going to be trouble, Mr. Holmes, I know it. Gerald hates us, and he's jealous of our share in the estate.
You spoke of preventing murder just now. Yet I can see that you've selected your cousin Gerald as the potential murderer. Am I right?
Yes, you are. Mm-hmm. But don't think it's personal prejudice that makes me suspect him. I have good reason for doing so.
Oh, what reason?
This evening, just before dinner, I helped Gerald off with his top coat and went to hang it up for him. As I did so, I heard a strange metallic clink in one of his pockets. I slipped my hand inside it and found a hypodermic syringe and a small phial of liquid. I opened the phial and smelled it. Gentlemen, it reeked of bitter almonds.
Bitter cyanide, eh?
And what did you do?
I thought of destroying it, but I realized that would put him on his guard, so I replaced it in his pocket. Of course, I warned the others, and we decided that I'd come to you. I had to see a most important client tonight, or I'd have been here earlier.
Yes, it seems odd that you didn't come directly to Mr. Holmes as soon as you'd made the discovery, Mr. Lovelace. After all, if a potential murderer is walking about with a pocket full of cyanide, I should have thought that itself was more important than business.
Well, Yes, I suppose it might seem so to you, Doctor.
Now, that's a most interesting stick you carry, sir. May I examine it?
Of course. Here.
Oh, thank you.
Now I see how you deduced that Mr. Lovelace had a dog, Holmes. There are the marks of the dog's teeth on the stick.
Yes, my dear Watson, but these marks under scrutiny give us even more specific information. He's a large dog. You've had him for some years, Mr. Lovelace, and he's now old and feeble.
Well, you're perfectly right, but I'll be hanged if I can see how you can tell that from looking at a walking stick.
This stick is covered with teeth marks, therefore it has been carried many times by the dog. Now, it's a heavy stick, so only a large dog could have carried it. And the teeth marks also indicate a large jaw. The older marks are deep sunk. Look here. The fresh ones, where the wood is not yet darkened, are shallow. Yes, it's obvious that the jaws are losing their strength.
That's very clever of you, Mr. Holmes, but I don't see what it has to do with the case in hand.
Well, neither do I, Holmes, I must confess.
No, surely it tells us that your story, Mr. Lovelace, may bear a less terrifying implication than you think. On the other hand, its implication may be even more terrifying. Oh, it's late at night. I feel that any further delay in this matter would be extremely dangerous. I suggest that we get a cab and come to your house in Camberwell at once.
Alice, Randolph, I'm glad you're still up. I was able to persuade Mr. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson to come back with me. Gentlemen, this is my cousin, Alice Harley.
How do you do?
How do you do, Miss Harley?
How do you do?
And my cousin, Randolph Lovelace.
How do you do? How do you do, sir?
How do you do, Mr.
I've
Lovelace?
told him about the whole business, Randolph, so we can all speak perfectly freely.
Let's begin by sitting down, shall we? Randolph and I have just finished a little cold supper. We've been to the theatre tonight.
Well, Mr. Holmes, I suppose Edmund told you about finding the hypodermic syringe and the cyanide in Gerald's coat pocket.
Yes,
tonight.
indeed. May I ask where your cousin, Gerald Lovelace, is now?
We left the house at 7, but I imagine Gerald went upstairs at 8, as usual. Didn't he, Edmund?
On the stroke of 8, Alice. He's very fixed in his habits, Mr. Holmes. He goes up to his room every night at 8. There he reads or works on his accounts and eventually goes to bed any time between 10 and 1.
But he might still be up.
I should like to speak to him a little later. In the meanwhile, may I ask you two young people, tell me quite honestly your feelings about your cousin Gerald?
And you might as well be frank. I've kept nothing back.
All right. Randolph and I hate him. First of all, we're sure he's jealous of our shares in the estate, and then we...
Alice and I want to get married, Mr. Holmes, and Gerald won't hear of it.
But you're cousins, aren't you?
Only second cousins, Dr. Watson. Gerald is dreadfully conventional. He's threatened us that if we do get married, he'll go to court and try to have our shares in the estate annulled.
And from the way the will is worded, I wouldn't be surprised if he could do it. So you can see why we have no great love for him, and why we're afraid of him.
Well, he sounds an extremely unpleasant person to me.
You mentioned there were 5 cousins in the house. 3 of you were here. Mr. Gerald Lovelace is upstairs. Who and where is the 5th cousin?
The 5th cousin is my brother, Gilly. He's something of a tragedy, I'm afraid. You see, Gilly's 20, but he never developed mentally beyond the age of 8. He had a bad fall in the hunting field when he was a kid. He's been like this ever since.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that, sir.
But he's the dearest, most gentle boy you've ever met.
And, incidentally, the one person in this house who doesn't hate Gerald.
The poor fellow doesn't understand the conditions of the will, I suppose.
No. But if he did, I don't think it'd make any difference. I swear that Gilly loves every living thing, especially Gladstone. Gladstone is the name of his dog.
His dog? Yes. The dog may be the key to this whole matter.
The dog? What makes you say that, Holmes?
When a man brings a quick and painless poison home to a household containing an old and feeble dog, it's more than possible that he has obtained that poison, quite legitimately, to give the dog a merciful death.
To kill Gladstone? Oh, no.
After all, Alice, dear, he is old and almost blind
But,
now.
Mr. Holmes, if you think Gerald brought home the poison to put Gladstone out of the way, well, and I admit it sounds perfectly logical, what made you decide to come here tonight?
Because I dare not even guess what you may have done by intruding the thought of murder in this situation. Where is your brother Gilly?
In his room upstairs, asleep.
I wonder if we might go up to him. I should like to talk to him, if you don't mind. And after that, I want a few words with your cousin, Gerald Lovelace.
He's asleep, Mr. Holmes.
Yes, with a dog in his arm.
I'm afraid we'll have to waken him.
Gilly? Gilly? That's all right, Gladstone. We're not going to hurt him. Gilly?
Who is it? Oh, hello, Alice. Who are these men? They've come to take Gladstone away.
No, Gilly, we haven't.
Oh, of course not, Gilly. We've just come to admire him. Your brother's been telling us what a fine dog he is.
Oh, that's different.
Isn't he beautiful? I just had such a wonderful dream about him. Such a wonderful dream.
What was it, Gilly?
Well, he was all young again. Just a puppy. He was chasing a rabbit across a cliff top. And I was running with him. Oh, Gladstone looked so beautiful. Didn't you, old boy? Of course you did. And you know, the rabbit went down a hole, and Gladstone went down after him. And I went down after Gladstone. And we all had tea with the rabbits. Oh, it was so funny. They all had little green hats on. Hats with feathers. I wanted Gladstone to try one on, but he wouldn't. So sleepy. Come on, Gladstone. Let's go back to the tea party.
Poor kid. His world may be a great deal more pleasant than ours, Watson.
That's what I'd like to think, Mr. Holmes.
Now I'd like to have a few words with your cousin Gerald.
His room's at the end of this corridor.
I'm afraid Gilly wasn't much help to you, Mr. Holmes.
On the contrary, young lady, he told me exactly what I wanted to know.
Here we are. This is Gerald's room.
There's no light under the door. He must have gone to sleep.
I'm afraid we must waken him, too.
Must be a heavy sleeper.
But he isn't. He's a remarkably light one.
Come on, let's go in. Strike a match, will you, old fellow?
Sure.
The gas mantle's at the head of his bed, Dr. Watson.
Yeah.
Well, he's lying on the outside of his bed. He must be... There's blood on the pillow.
Great Scott, Holmes. The back of his skull smashed in. He's been murdered.
Oh, no. Horrible.
Yes, Watson, but not by the blows on his head. Look here on the table by his bed.
A hypodermic syringe and a broken file.
Yes, a broken file. Reeking of bitter almonds.
Poor devil. Well, I won't pretend I liked him. But what a ghastly way to die.
All they that take the sword shall perish with the sword. So the scriptures say, Mr. Lovelace. The very suspicion of the killing has brought murder to pass. Well, it's too late to prevent it. Our job now is to find the killer and see that he's brought to justice.
Dr. Watson will tell you the rest of his story in just a few seconds. Just time enough for me to tell you that if there's one wine that's perfect for any occasion, it's Petri California Sherry. With a bottle of that rich, amber-colored Petri Sherry on hand, you can make that time before dinner a main event. And Petri Sherry is the perfect answer to the question of what to serve when company comes. Serve Petri Sherry alone and let its full, wonderful flavor speak for itself, or serve Petri Sherry with hors d'oeuvres or party sandwiches. And remember, you can serve Petri Sherry proudly, because Petri is the proudest name in the history of American wine. Well, Dr. Watson, so you found Gerald Lovelace dead in one of the bedrooms of the house in Camberwell. What did you do? Send for the police?
Not at once, Mr. Bartell. Sherlock Holmes persuaded the remainder of the household to give him the opportunity of examining the scene of the crime carefully before the police were sent for. And so, a few minutes before 1 o'clock that October night, Holmes and I stood alone in the room of death.
Turn the gas a little higher, will you, old chap?
John. You know, Holmes, I think you should have sent for the police right away.
In a case like this, Watson, I prefer to be my own police. When I have spun the web, they may take the flies, but not before. What are the results of your medical examination, old chap?
Well, it's exactly as you reconstructed it, Holmes. He was first beaten on the head with that poker lying on the floor. Then he had the full vial of cyanide injected into his left wrist.
Can you estimate the time of death at all accurately?
No, this room's confoundedly hot. He might have died any time from 1 to 5 hours ago.
Yes. It's now 1 o'clock, and we know that he was alive at 8. Mr. Edmund Lovelace saw him leave for his room at that hour.
Yes, if he was telling the truth.
One thing we do know for a fact is that this man was murdered at the exact moment he was going to bed. He's wearing his nightgown and nightcap, but his bed has not been slept in.
Well, isn't it possible that the murderer might have killed him shortly after 8 and then dressed him in his night clothes to confuse us?
No, my dear chap. You will notice that the hypodermic needle passed through the sleeve of his nightshirt. Here. Also, the nightcap is crushed and bloodstained from the blows of the poker. No, Gerald Lovelace had prepared the bed.
Yes. With a glass of water on the night table and the prayer book and the watch.
Yes. signs of a prosperous and meticulous man. Mm-hmm. Very fine gold watch and in excellent condition. Aha. There's the answer, Watson.
What do you mean, there's the answer, Watson?
I just wound this watch one turn, and then it was fully wound. That provides us with the time schedule for our murder. Come on. We'll send a servant for the police, and while they're on the way, if you'll call everyone together, I should like to put a few more questions to this family. Before the police arrive, I should like to hear your statements again very carefully, if you don't mind. Mr. Edmund Lovelace, what were your exact movements tonight?
I left here shortly before 10. From 10 o'clock until the time I came to Baker Street, I was with my client.
His name and address, please.
Derek Waterlow, 39 Onslow Square, South Kensington.
Thank you. Make a note of these, will you, Watson?
All right, you're home.
You, Miss Harley, and you, Mr. Randolph Lovelace, went to the theater together. Can any independent witness testify as to your movements?
Well, yes, Mr. Holmes. We went with friends, the Grant Moresbys. They live at the Clarendon Hotel off Charing Cross.
What time did you leave this house?
Well, it was about 7:45, wasn't it, Alice?
Yes. And after the play, we went to the Café Royal for a little refreshment with our friends and then came back here.
I see. And what time did you arrive back at this house?
Just a few minutes before midnight. I remember the grandfather clock in the hall striking just as we went into the drawing room.
And your brother Gilly, sir. I hate to waken him again. Have you any idea of his movements tonight?
Well, he never goes out after dark, Mr. Holmes. But I spoke to the cook as we came in tonight. She says that he played cards with her until just after 10 o'clock.
He was fast asleep when I looked in on him shortly after midnight.
Thank you. You've made a note of all these facts, Watson?
Yes, Holmes, I got them all down.
Good. Then let's be on our way to Baker Street.
But the police, Mr. Holmes, they're on their way.
I know. Please give them my regards, will you? Apologize for my informality and tell them that I shall have the answer to this matter probably in a little over 24 hours.
Holmes, here it is well after midnight. You haven't done a thing on the Camberwell case.
No, but you have, old chap. You've checked on all the time alibis and found them valid. I'm much obliged to you.
Yes, Inspector Lestrade was here tonight, you know, and he made some pretty caustic remarks, I can tell you.
Oh, didn't you inform him that I'll have the answer to the problem before many hours have passed?
I did, but you know, Lestrade, he wanted action.
He shall have it. Is the watch still running?
Yes, there's another thing. What'll Lestrade say when he finds that you took the dead man's watch?
I've no idea.
Oh, why didn't you take it anywhere?
You sound sleepy, old chap.
Yes, I am confoundedly sleepy.
Why don't you go to bed?
What are you going to do?
Continue my vigil with my pipe and the watch of a dead man. Watson, wake up.
What time is it?
5 o'clock in the morning.
Good Lord, what are you doing up at this hour?
The watch has just stopped. I'm about to rewind it.
What are you rewinding it for, Holmes? You waited over 24 hours for it to unwind.
When I know how many turns it takes to wind it fully, I shall have the answer to the whole business. 10, 11...
You're being confoundedly mysterious, as usual.
14 turns, and the watch is fully wound. Get your clothes on, old chap.
Well, where are we going on this hour?
To the house in Camberwell. Now I know who murdered Gerald Lovelace. Mr. Edmund Lovelace, I'm glad you let us in. Please take us up to your young cousin's room at once.
Really? What do you want with him?
I'll explain in a moment. Please take us up to him.
Oh, of course, but what brings you here at this hour of the morning?
Mr. Holmes knows who murdered your cousin.
I'm glad to hear it. It's more than the police seem to know. They were here half the night cross-examining us. Here we are. I don't think we'll bother to knock. Gilly? Gilly?
I'm awake. We heard you coming up the stairs, didn't we, Gladstone? It's the same man again. You're not going to take Gladstone away, are you? Please don't take him away.
Don't worry, Gilly. We're not going to touch him.
Oh, that's all right, then.
Oh, Gilly.
Yes?
You really love that dog, don't you?
Of course I do. More than anything or anybody.
I believe you'd even kill a man who tried to hurt Gladstone. wouldn't you?
Oh, yes, sir. I would.
Billy!
No.
Great Scott.
Gilly, I don't think you'd really kill a man. I don't think you could.
Couldn't I, though?
How would you kill him?
I'd hit him first. I'd take a poker and hit him on the head so he couldn't fight back. And then I'd take the nasty needle he told me he was going to stick in Gladstone, and I'd fill it full of that water he showed me, and I'd stick it in him. That's what I'd do. Then he'd be dead. And he couldn't hurt my Gladstone anymore. Not ever.
Let's leave him, shall we? Goodbye, Gilly. Pleasant dreams.
Goodbye, sir. Good old Gladstone.
You satisfied, sir?
Yes. Poor Gilly. There's no doubt about it, of course.
Can there be no one who described the murder to him, and yet he's just given an exact description of its method?
What'll happen to him? They won't try him.
No. A little pressure in the right places, and he'll be released to a private nursing home. I'll do everything I can, Mr. Lovelace.
Thank you, Mr. Holmes. Thank you very much.
Well, Holmes, now that we're back in Baker Street and the whole pressing case is finished with, perhaps you'll tell me how you knew that Gilly had committed the murder.
Well, consider the time schedules, old fellow. You checked the alibis of the other cousins and found them satisfactory. That meant that Alice Harley and Randolph Lovelace could have committed the crime only at midnight. Edmund only before 10. Gilly only around 11. You said that the time of death could have been at any of those hours.
Yes, I did. So how did you pin it down to 11?
The watch gave me the specific answer. When I picked it up, I unthinkingly wound it. Made one turn and was then fully wound. Now, when does a methodical, precise man like Gerald Lovelace wind his watch?
Just as he's going to bed.
Exactly, old fellow. So that it was obvious that he was killed precisely one watch stem turn before I wound his watch.
Now I'm beginning to see daylight, Holmes. So you let the watch run down?
That's what I did. It took 28 hours, from 1 o'clock the night before last until 5 this morning. Now, how many turns did it take to rewind it?
14, wasn't it?
That's right. Therefore, one turn of the watch stem equaled 2 hours, proving that Gerald Lovelace had been murdered 2 hours before 1 o'clock at 11 p.m.
When Gilly was the only one who could have done it. You know, Holmes, I still find it hard to believe that boy was capable of such a ghastly crime. He seemed so gentle.
Oh, he is. Except when his beloved dog's life was at stake, probably out of some mistaken notion of kindness. Gerald Lovelace warned the boy of his intentions regarding the dog. It's a sad business, Watson, a sad business.
I hate to think of that boy spending the rest of his life in a mental home.
I have one prayer for his future.
What's that, Holmes?
The dog Gladstone can't live very long. I pray that Gilly does not long outlive him.
Doctor, that was a remarkable bit of deduction on the part of Mr. Holmes.
Yes, extremely clever, wasn't it? Of course, if I may say so, I was of some small help myself.
Small help? Why, Doctor, you practically solved the case by yourself.
Oh, I wouldn't go as far as saying that.
But, Doctor, you did check all the alibis, didn't you?
Yes, I checked where each suspect was at various times.
Yes, you checked time. And what's more important than time?
Well,
Why, Doctor, time is even vitally important when it comes to wine.
I was wondering how you were going to bring that in.
And one thing we do know, Petrie took time to bring you good wine. So nobody can miss with Petrie wine. It's just got to be good. You know, you can't be in the wine business as long as the Petrie family without really learning all about the fine art of making wine. And don't forget, the Petrie family has been making fine wine since way back in the 1800s. So, naturally, they've been able to hand on down, from father to son, the result of generations of experience at turning luscious, sun-ripened grapes into fragrant, delicious wine. No matter what type of wine you prefer, you'll like it more if it's a Petrie wine, because Petrie took time to bring you good wine. Well, Dr. Watson, what new Sherlock Holmes story do you plan to tell us next week?
Well, now, next week, Mr. Bartell, I'm going to tell you a most unusual adventure that Holmes and I had when we were attending a performance at the Opera House in Rome. It concerns a famous singer who lost her voice, an understudy who was nearly lynched, and a murder that baffled the police. I call it The Adventure of the Terrifying Cat.
Well, that's a story we've got to hear.
Thank you, Mr. Bartell. And before you go, I want to talk to our friends about their war bonds. You know, during the war, the best investment we could find was the United States war bond. And for my money, they're still a great investment. They're called United States savings bonds now, and only the name is changed. Savings bonds are sold in the same denominations and give you all the same advantages. And you can buy savings bonds at the same places at your bank or your post office or through the payroll savings plan. So invest all you can in United States savings bonds, because you cannot find a better or a safer investment.
Tonight's Sherlock Holmes adventure was written by Dennis Green and Anthony Boucher and was suggested by an incident in the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle story, The 5 Orange Pips. Music is by Dean Fossler. Mr. Rathbone appears through the courtesy of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, and Mr. Bruce through the courtesy of Universal Pictures, where they are now starring in the Sherlock Holmes series. The Petri Wine Company of San Francisco, California, invites you to tune in again next week, same time, same station. Sherlock Holmes comes to you from our Hollywood studios. This is Harry Bartell saying good night for the Petri family. Listen every Monday on most of these same stations at 8 o'clock to Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Michael Shayne, followed immediately by Michael Shayne, followed immediately by
Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce in the new adventures of Sherlock Holmes.
This rebroadcast is especially for the American Armed Forces and their allies. Now let's join Dr. Campbell as he enters Dr. Watson's study. Here we are once again in Dr. Watson's study.
Come in, Mr. Campbell. Come in. Here, sit down and relax. You look a bit wilted, old fella.
Oh, yes, it's such a beautiful spring evening. I thought I'd walk over. In fact, it's so beautiful I dawdled most of the way, drinking in the warm air and the smell of things growing until suddenly I realized I was blame well going to be late if I didn't hurry. So I ran the last 3 blocks.
Yes, I know how it is. This lovely spring weather is certainly conducive to indolence. My household claim that when I go out to do the spring planting, I spend most of my time leaning on the spade, sniffing, and listening to the birds. Not an unpleasant way to pass the time of day, incidentally. Yes, a day like today is almost as relaxing as a Turkish bath. Which reminds me of a curious and gory experience that Holmes and I had in just such an establishment some years ago.
It sounds suspiciously like the gentleman who said bang. Oh, speaking of explosions...
Now, Mr. Campbell, you must never complain about the way that a storyteller begins his yarn. Anything is better than an abrupt beginning. Now, put me all out. Where was I?
In a Turkish bath, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yes, it's Turkish bath. You're not mistaken. Yes, that's it. Well, now, to begin at the beginning, it was in the hectic, hair-raising, and I might even say the glorious days of the great battle of wits between Sherlock Holmes and the notorious Professor Moriarty.
What you might call a real battle of the titans, eh, Doctor?
Indeed it was, Mr. Campbell. Things had been unusually hectic for Holmes for several months. Moriarty had been particularly active, and Holmes had had many sleepless nights. Finally, things had calmed down a bit, and I tried to persuade him to take a badly needed holiday. The net result being that he finally did agree to have an afternoon off and accompany me to a Turkish bath. As a matter of fact, both Holmes and I had a weakness for the Turkish bath. Over a smoke, in the pleasant latitude of the drawing room, I've often found him less reticent and more human than at any other time.
The heat melted his cast iron reserve, eh, Dr. Watson?
Only slightly, Mr. Campbell, only slightly. Well, as I was saying, on the upper floor of a certain Northumberland Avenue establishment, there is an isolated corner where two couches lie side by side, and it was on these that we were lying. Holmes had just shot his long, sinewy arm out of the towels which enveloped him and was fishing about in the inside pocket of his coat, with tongue beside him.
Where did I put it? Where on earth did I put it? Oh, confound the thing. Watson. I forgot to bring my tobacco.
Oh, relax, Holmes. Just relax. Forget about tobacco. Forget Moriarty and relax. That's what we came in here for.
Burble, 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 burble. I am relaxed, my dear fellow. I want to smoke.
What about the burble, burble? Nothing like the peace and seclusion of a Turkish bath.
Mr. Holmes. Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Hello? Gus, the steam room attendant seems to be paging you.
Oh, my goodness. Now what?
Has anyone seen Mr. Sherlock Holmes? See in here, please.
Here I am, Gus. Here I am. What do you want? Come on.
Oh, Mr. Holmes, it's good I find you. There has been an accident, Mr. Holmes. A bad accident. It's Lord Canterbury. He's in his dressing room, covered with blood.
Oh. In that case, I fancy you want Dr. Watson, don't you? Not me.
I'll be with you in a minute, Gus.
Oh, no, not Dr. Watson. It's too late for you. He's dead.
Dead?
Stabbed in 6 places. Come and look at him, Mr. Holmes, please.
Dead? Dear me. All right. I'll come at once.
Good gracious me. What's all the commotion? Why can't we have a little peace and quiet around? What's the meaning of this, Gus? Why are these two persons talking at the top of their voices?
My dear Mr. Well, whoever you are, I was never under the impression that the Olympia Baths were a church. Furthermore, my dear Mr. Never mind the name.
Tunbridge. Frederick Hubert Tunbridge, a Liberal leader in the present Parliament, which everyone knows who keeps abreast of the time.
My dear Mr. Tunbridge, I do not concern myself with trivialities. Furthermore, as I was saying before being so rudely interrupted, you may be interested to know that your hated rival, Lord Canterbury, the Conservative leader, with whom you are known to have publicly locked horns on several occasions.
What if I have? What's he done now, the old fool?
If you mean Lord Canterbury, he's done absolutely... Yes, he hasn't done anything, and probably never will again.
What are you blithering about?
Well, it seems that Gus has just discovered your, shall we say, political vis-a-vis dead in his dressing room.
Oh, you mean he's had a heart attack?
No, I don't mean anything of the kind. He's been stabbed. In how many places did you say, Gus?
In 6 places, Mr. Holmes.
But that's impossible. I talked to him not half an hour ago. We had a little conference, Sub Rose, you understand, while he was waiting for Gus to come in and give him his batter. Well, he was quite all right when I left him.
Oh, really? Are you sure?
What do you mean? Of course I'm sure. Canterbury was alive and dressing like a trooper when I left him. I passed Gus in the corridor. I came out of Canterbury's dressing room. He'll tell you the old boy was alive and kicking.
Oh, will he? How about it, Gus?
It is true I hear swearing, but from which dressing room it comes I could not be sure. The walls are so thin, you understand.
Yes, indeed. It's quite true the dressing room walls are thin.
Gus, who is this person, and why is he asking all these stupid questions?
But, Mr. Tunbridge, this gentleman is Mr. Sherlock Holmes, the famous detective.
I've never heard of him.
Not even with you there, Holmes.
well, send for Scotland Yard. This is a matter of national importance.
Quite, yes. I think you're quite right. You may as well send for Inspector Lestrade, Gus. Scotland Yard will have to be informed in any case. In the meantime, however, well, I think I'll take a look.
Well, in the meantime, Mr. Whoever you are, I insist that everything be left strictly alone.
Very well, then, Mr. Thingamabob, if you insist, but you'll be losing valuable time.
I most emphatically do insist. Well, I'm getting out of here.
Me too, I'd like on the point.
You can do without me. I think I'll just...
just a moment, gentlemen. Just a moment, if you please. I think it's only fair to point out to you all that suspicion is bound to fall on anyone who leaves before the authorities have had a chance to search and question him.
Search me? Oh. You mean I have to be searched?
We seem to have stirred up quite a hornet's nest, eh, Watson?
Yes, and I brought you in here for a rest.
Well, Lestrade?
Nasty mess, eh, Mr. Holmes? Knife from the back.
Yes, not once, but 6 times. Deep, ferocious thrusts. Quite unnecessarily brutal. And, if I may say so, bloody.
Yeah. Place looks like a charnel house.
Yes, whoever did the deed must have been drenched in blood. Might tell your men to search for blood-stained towels or garments, will you, Lestrade?
Yes. Well, I'll pick up anything that's got blood on it. Never you fear, Mr. Holmes. I've ordered a search of everybody and everything on the premises.
Yes, that's not going to be very popular with Mr. Tunbridge, eh, Holmes?
Oh, I wouldn't care if he was the Archbishop of Canterbury. When Scotland Yard says search everybody, we search everybody. Besides, everybody knows he and the corpse here are bitter enemies. They fought like cat and dog. How long would you say he'd been dead, Mr. Holmes?
Oh, I don't know. About, let me say, an hour and a half. Took nearly 40 minutes to get you here, Lestrade. And Canterbury had been dead, let me see, over half an hour when Gus found him.
Yes, Gus. Did the doorman notice who left the establishment during the half hour before the body was found?
Yes, sir. Only old Mr. Welford. And he's too feeble and nearsighted to do a crime like this.
Was the door to Lord Canterbury's dressing room locked?
No, sir.
Oh? And how does it happen that he lay here for over half an hour before anyone found him?
Particularly as he was down on the books for a massage half an hour before he was found.
Well, you see, I thought he was asleep. Lord Canterbury, sometimes he liked a little nap after he was in the steam room, and he didn't want I should disturb him.
Oh, that's very interesting. Then you did come in this room once before you realized Lord Canterbury was dead?
Yes, Mr. Holmes. But he was lying there so peaceful.
So peaceful, yes. On his back?
Yes, sir, just like we found him. It wasn't until the second time I come in I see he has his eyes open.
And the place is, shall we say, all spattered with blood?
It was so dark. The shades were drawn. It was not easy to see anything if you don't look close.
Even then, some people are unable to observe the most obvious facts.
And what might you mean by that?
Oh, just an observation, Lestrade. Just a gratuitous observation.
Come in. Well, Willis, what's up?
We've searched the place from top to bottom, just like you said, Inspector. And there's no bloodstains nowhere, except on this.
And what's that?
A pocket knife, sir, large size.
Oh.
The handle's been wiped off, but there's still some bloodstains on the blade. We found it in the locker of a bloke named of Tunbridge.
Just a minute, Lestrade. Don't go off the deep end. Willis.
Yes, sir?
You say there were no bloodstains anywhere except on this knife.
Not a sign of a bloodstain nowhere.
You searched the dirty linen hampers, the towels and lockers, where the customers had their clothes?
Oh, yes, sir. We searched everything. There's not a sign of blood anywhere but on that there weapon.
Amazing.
That's enough for me. This here is the murder weapon, and it was found in Tunbridge's locker. Bring him in here, Willis, and we'll have him on the carpet.
Yes, sir. Right away.
I knew he was the murderer from the beginning. Who has the motive for killing Canterbury? This chap Tunbridge. Who had the opportunity? This chap Tunbridge. He admits himself he had a talk with the deceased and they had words. And where is this here bloodstained knife found? Nowhere but in this Mr. Tunbridge's locker.
Stupid place for a murderer to hide the fatal weapon in his own locker. Tunbridge isn't as stupid as that, Lestrade.
No? And why was it there?
Look here, this is an outrage, keeping me here like this. Well, don't you realize I have influence? Well, you might at least let me put on my clothes instead of hauling them about. I'll complain to the authorities. I'll have you dismissed, all of you.
Oh, maybe you will, sir. And then again, maybe you won't. But first of all, you'll answer some questions. Have you ever seen this knife before?
Knife? Yes, of course. It's mine. I've had it all my life. I used to take it fishing when I was a boy.
Oh, indeed. That would explain its size, then.
Well, now I use it to open my letters.
Oh, you do? Are you sure that's all you use it for?
Yes, of course.
And why are these here bloodstains on it?
Bloodstains?
Yeah.
Where?
Here, and here, and here. No, don't you touch it. We don't want to destroy any possible fingerprints.
But if it's mine, my fingerprints are already on it.
Yes, he's right there, Lestrade.
Furthermore, that stain doesn't look like blood to me. It's not red enough. It looks like rust.
As a matter of fact, if the stain is a nice blood red, it's fairly certain it's not blood. Now, this particular stain,
You
as far as I
leave
see...
this particular stain to Scotland Yard, Mr.
Yes. Don't forget, my dear Lestrade, I invented the first infallible test for blood stains.
That's quite true, Lestrade. You did.
Yes, indeed. My test is infallible. It works on blood that is new or on blood that is old. I discovered the first reagent, which is precipitated by hemoglobin.
I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes, sorry, but Scotland Yard hasn't any time for lectures. We believe in action. Now, Mr. Tunbridge, it's my duty to take you into custody, and it's also my duty to warn you that anything that you may say may be used in evidence against you.
Anything I say? Do you realize whom you're arresting? I'm a leading figure in British politics.
So was this fellow who lies here stabbed with your knife, which has still got bloodstains on it.
Lestrade, if you'll pardon me for saying so, in this case, it's not the bloodstains that are in evidence, but the bloodstains that are not in evidence, which is the significant factor.
What? What do you mean by that?
Simply that it would have been rather difficult for Mr. Tunbridge to have committed a murder as gory as this one without having bloodstains on the towel he's wearing or on the clothes which are still in his locker.
What was to prevent him from dropping his towel outside Lord Canterbury's dressing room, going in and knifing him in the back, then sneaking down to the shower rooms, not more than 20 feet down the corridor, and washing away the evidence?
Me going round about it in the nude? Certainly not.
Most certainly not, sir. Remember, my dear Lestrade, as you drag one of Britain's leaders away to jail, that it might have been possible for him to stab his enemy in a fit of temper, but he would never have dreamed of running up and down the corridors in his birthday suit. Oh, let me see. I'm afraid I shall have to look for another explanation of the missing bloodstains.
Holmes, it's late. Everyone else has left the Turkish bath.
Everyone but the faithful Gus.
Oh, I don't mind. Tonight we have by my house sauerkraut. I don't like sauerkraut. Besides, I've got to stay and lock up.
Then you'll have to wait till we find the bloodstains. Here somewhere. That's why I sent home for my famous benzidine peroxide mixture. Somewhere on the premises there is a towel or linen or something that has bloodstains.
Oh, but we've been through the towels and the linen a dozen times, Holmes. No sign of blood. Furthermore, according to the establishment's checklist, there are no towels or any linen missing. Even Gus, his linen, which he washes himself, is hung here on the line.
You don't wash any linen but your own, do you, Gus?
No, Mr. Holmes. Everything go out to the laundry. I wash my own because I'd like to be fresh and clean. Twice a day I wash, noon and evening.
Yes. The evening's job hasn't been done yet, eh?
No. This one I washed this noon. It's my towel from this morning.
Oh, yes. This morning's towel washed this noon. Yes. But was it? Canterbury was murdered in the middle of the afternoon about 3:30. Now it's now after 7 o'clock. Don't you see, Watson? This towel. Don't you see?
No, Holmes, I don't. I don't see a blasted thing. The towel's as clean as a whistle.
But not dry. If it had been washed at noon, it would be dry now. But it's still damp. Yes, it was washed after Canterbury's death.
Of course, to remove the bloodstains.
Gus? Mr. Holmes. That's why you didn't report the death until half an hour after Canterbury had died.
Oh, no.
You had to have time to remove the bloodstains.
But that's not true. Besides, you can't prove anything. The towel is clean now. There are no marks, no stains.
The very fact that there were no stains on it, Gus, first made me suspect you. Lord Canterbury was found lying on his back. And yet, when you informed us that he had been stabbed, you were quite definite about the number of times that he'd been stabbed. But in the back.
Yes?
Yes. How did you know that, Gus?
Well, I lift him up and I look.
Of course, I see what you're getting at, Holmes. He couldn't have done that. No one could examine the corpse without getting blood all over himself.
And yet when Gus appeared to tell us of Canterbury's death, there wasn't a spot of blood on him. But if I can prove that this towel which you so carefully washed once had bloodstains and that you were very careful to remove those stains...
That you will never prove. I have scrubbed, I have used soap, I have even boiled that towel. There is not even a suspicion of a bloodstain left.
That is where you're wrong, my friend. Watson, run the water into this tub, will you? No matter how thoroughly you try to remove a bloodstain, it will never... Out. Damned spot. Yes, we only need enough to moisten the cloth. Now I'll drop a few drops of my famous solution onto the cloth. There we are.
Well, all I can see is a lot of pale blue streaks.
Yes, it's undoubtedly blood.
Blood?
Yes, the curious blue streaks prove infallibly that there was blood on the towel. And now, Gus, are you going to explain why you were so anxious to remove these bloodstains?
No, I did not do it. It was Mr. Tunbridge. He did it. The knife was his knife. There was blood on it. Let me out of here. It's not my fault. I don't want to hurt.
Holmes, he's running away.
Watson, we can't let him escape.
Well, there he goes down the corridor.
He's gone into the steam room.
Don't worry. I'll get him. Phew. The steam's thick in here. I can hardly see my hand before my face.
Must be in here. Look under the benches, Watson. Watson, leave the door open. Let some of this blasted steam out of here, will you?
I didn't shut the door. Holmes, you hear that?
The door. Someone's locked the door.
Hey, somebody, let us out. Let us out, you hear? We're locked in. We've been locked in by mistake.
No, you're wrong. It was no mistake, my friend.
Moriarty. He's here in the steam room with us.
No, that's just his voice through the ventilator. So you were behind this murder too, Professor?
Of course. Perhaps you would like to know why I had to kill Lord Canterbury.
Yes, indeed. That would be very interesting.
Good. I found it necessary to start a feud between the two great political parties because they're in danger of forming a coalition to pass certain housing reforms that would have proved very expensive to me. Well, what better way to break up an incipient collaboration than by killing one leader, having the other hanged for his murder?
Very ingenious, Moriarty. A pity you should have chosen such a clumsy tool as Gus.
Clumsy? Perhaps. But he fooled Scotland Yard, Mr. Holmes. It was just my ill luck that you should be on the premises when the accident occurred.
Thank you for the compliment.
Not at all. However, it's a mistake which I'm sure Gus will be able to rectify.
Gus? How?
Very simple. I've sent him to put more coals on the fire. Any moment now, there should be more steam. Yes, gentlemen, much more steam. I'm afraid that when you finish with this steam bath, you will never need another. No. You will be boiled alive.
He's right there. There comes the steam pouring out of the opening over our heads. If only we could reach that opening, we could stuff some of these towels into the pipeline and cut off the flow.
Good Lord, Holmes, it's getting very hot in here.
Wait. I have it. One of the long benches. I'll stand on the end. You'll have to balance until I climb on the top. Talk, Watson. Make a noise. Anything to cover up the moving of the bench.
Very well. Oh, it's getting hot. Moriarty. This has gone far enough. We can't stand much more of this.
Steady, Holmes. Now hand me out the towel, quick.
Moriarty, turn the steam off. You hear, Moriarty? Can't you hear? The heat, it's becoming unbearable.
Just more towels, Holmes.
Is it getting hot enough in there, Gentleman Boyle? I'm sure it is. Boiled nice and pink, boiled in steam, live steam. Goodbye, Mr. Sherlock Holmes.
Now what happened? You can't stand up there all night, Holmes.
I won't have to. Pressure's terrific. Huh? Steady luck. It will soon become so great that it may burst the boiler.
That's dangerous. Buildings will be known to collapse because of bursting boilers.
Nevertheless, it's our one chance. If only the confounded boiler burst before my arm is snapped in two.
But Holmes, your arm isn't as strong as the boiler plate.
Pressure. Pressure, my dear Watson. Measured per square foot of air surface. Quite a bit of service to a boiler. The opening of this pipe is fairly small. All the same, I'm afraid I can't hold out much longer, Watson.
Hold on, Holmes. Hold on. It must burst soon. It must.
The pressure. My hands. My hands. Look out. Look out. Look out.
And you came through the explosion all right, Dr. Watson?
Well, I had a nasty crack where Holmes and the bench fell on me, and Holmes had the wind knocked out of him, but we were in fairly good shape by the time the fire brigade pulled us out from the wreckage.
Moriarty wasn't by any chance trapped or killed or something?
Unfortunately, no. But they found Gus, however, quite dead.
I suppose the exploding boiler did for him.
No, there was a bullet wound in the back of his head. I rather imagine that Moriarty wanted to make sure that he would never appear in court
Doctor, if I had to go through what you went through in that Turkish bath episode, I think I'd never want to work on another case with Holmes again.
Come now, Mr. Campbell. I certainly did feel like that for a couple of hours. But by the time we got back to Baker Street and sat down to one of Mrs. Hudson's good meals, well, I was ready for anything that Holmes had in mind. You know, there's nothing like a good dinner to make you feel a new man.
You have been listening to An Adventure in Crime with Basil Rathbone as Sherlock Holmes and Nigel Bruce as Dr. Watson.